Imagine a world where the air is thick with the stench of decay, where towns and cities are eerily silent, and the ground is littered with the bones of those who once flourished. This was the horrifying reality in 14th century Europe as the Black Death swept across the continent, claiming millions of lives in a matter of years. But have you ever wondered how this catastrophe, this harbinger of death, transformed Europe in ways that still echo through history today? Stick around, because the legacy of the Black Death isn't just a tale of tragedy, it's a complex narrative that reshaped the very foundations of society, economy, and culture. By the end of this journey, you won't just understand the past, you'll see how its shadows loom over our present. The plague arrived in Europe in 1347, creeping in like a specter aboard merchant ships. These vessels' dank hulls carried not just cargo of spices and silk, but, unbeknownst to their crew and to the people of Europe, the dreaded bacterium Yersinia pestis. The initial outbreaks were unsettling, but few could have predicted the ensuing chaos, a world plunged into darkness. The death toll was staggering, with estimates suggesting that up to 25 million lives were extinguished, almost a third of Europe's population. While those figures may seem like mere numbers in history books, each one represents a story of love, loss, and tragedy. Here's something you didn't expect. In the realm of human suffering and death, something unexpected happened. Surviving the plague became a catalyst for significant changes. Labor shortages crippled economies, but they also gave rise to a powerful shift in social dynamics. With so many deceased, common workers found themselves in a position of previously unimaginable strength. Imagine waking up one day to find that your labor could demand higher wages. That's exactly what happened post-plague. This sharp upheaval shifted the balance of power and encouraged peasants to vie for better conditions and rights. As towns swelled with job-related opportunities due to scarcity, townspeople began pushing against the feudal system that had long kept them shackled. But the story doesn't end there. The Black Death also left an indelible mark on the religious landscape of Europe. With widespread death and suffering, many began to question their faith. Why would a benevolent God allow such horror to unfold? The lines between faith and doubt blurred. You might be wondering how this would influence organizations like the Church, which had long been the bastion of spiritual authority. In truth, the Church faced a crisis of credibility. The populace's disillusionment sparked transformative movements, creating room for reformers like Martin Luther, whose ideas would ignite the Reformation in the 16th century. What seems like a symptom of a tragedy morphed into the springboard for a broader challenge to religious authority. As we navigate through these tumultuous changes, let's talk about the artistic renaissance that emerged from the somber backdrop of death. You see, art is often born of struggle, and the Black Death was no different. In the wake of the plague, artists began to explore themes surrounding mortality, life, and the human condition. The macabre became a focal point in art, culminating in significant works like The Dance of Death, which portrayed the universality of death and offered poignant reminders that no one escapes its grasp. Can you imagine a world where death and the afterlife became central in the collective consciousness? This exploration led to new ways of thinking, ultimately paving the way for humanism and other movements that celebrated human experience and emotion. Another gripping aspect of this dark legacy lies in the health systems that began to emerge from the ashes. The plague's indiscriminate devastation highlighted the inadequacies of medical practices at the time. The Black Death effectively ripped through the curtain of ignorance that veiled understanding of health and hygiene. What you might not realize is that this led to the establishment of the first public health systems in Europe. Local governments sought to protect their citizens by creating quarantine laws and health boards that proactively dealt with outbreaks. These early interventions paved the groundwork for modern public health policies, revealing a shift in how societies organized themselves in response to crises. But let's not overlook the economic ramifications that resonated long after the plague receded. With a drastically reduced workforce, the economy faced a dire need for hands to till the land and produce goods. In short, a labor shortage meant that wages climbed and working conditions improved. Initially, one might think this was a fortunate turn, but it also led to widespread social unrest. You may wonder if a better life for peasants came without strings attached. Rather surprisingly, the rise in wages and quality of life led certain classes to push back, with wealthy landowners seeking to maintain their influence, often by implementing harsh laws to curb this new peasant power. The tug-of-war between classes echoed throughout the subsequent decades, leading to uprisings and revolts. Have you ever stopped to think about how the Black Death reshaped urban landscapes? As people fled towns rife with the plague, those locations saw a mass exodus. Urban centers that were once bustling reduced in population, while some areas experienced a dramatic uptick of migrants seeking safety. This inadvertently shifted demographics. The survivors began relocating, laying the groundwork for new towns and cities. This shift underscored the tenacity and adaptability of the human spirit. Life finds a way to flourish, even amid decay. But this migration didn't just alter geography, it also played a critical role in fostering new cultural exchanges and ideas, laying the groundwork for the Renaissance. Speaking of the Renaissance, let's touch on how the plague served as a catalyst for change in the intellectual landscape. The quest for knowledge intensified as Europe wrestled with existential dilemmas posed by the epidemic. Scholars began confronting ideas mingled with philosophy, science, and religion as they sought answers from the shadow of the plague. The ancient texts of the Greeks re-emerged, igniting an intellectual firestorm that birthed rigor and curiosity that had long been sidetracked. One can argue that this resurrected interest laid the foundations of modern science. Imagine the leap from fear-driven superstition to systematic inquiry. What's truly fascinating is how these social, economic, and intellectual shifts naturally interacted to forge a modern Europe. The interactions of various classes created a melting pot of ideas that would critique, improve, and ultimately revolutionize the landscape. Isn't it extraordinary that a singular, horrifying event could set in motion a series of interrelated changes affecting everything from social structures to scientific inquiry? The Black Death remains a potent reminder of the complexities of human society and how adversity can sometimes drive remarkable change. But the darker undertones of the Black Death's legacy didn't cease with the birth of a new world order. The psychological scars ran deep, forging a pessimism that embedded itself in the cultural psyche of Europe. Literature reflected this existential dread. A good example lies in the writings of Geoffrey Chaucer and his haunting collection, The Canterbury Tales. The narratives carry themes of corruption, mortality, and vulnerability, mirroring society's struggles to reconcile with the aftermath of tragedy. You might be surprised to discover that this is precisely how contemporary literature pushes its readers to confront the reality of human nature, much like today's ongoing explorations of pain, loss, and resilience. Moreover, let's not bypass the consequences regarding societal stratification and the construction of societal norms that arose from these shifts. With the drastic loss of life came a newfound perspective on human relationships, and societal values morphed. People started realizing that life was fragile, and they began forging deeper connections, fostering family ties, kinships, and community bonds that would serve as the backbone of future societies. The concept of individualism began to germinate, ushering in a world where personal experiences tempered collective understanding. Curiously enough, if we trace these threads of connection, we discover yet another layer, the emergence of a consumer society. The persistent demand for luxury goods post-plague offered an unexpected economic pathway for merchants and artisans alike. Yes, the Black Death redefined Europe's economic landscape, ushering in a new age of consumption. Towns became markets, and townspeople became consumers. As a result, a burgeoning middle class started to form, a critical step toward establishing capitalist economies that we witness today. As we draw closer to the conclusion, it's important to reflect on the lessons the Black Death imparts, even centuries later. The blending of tragedy and transformation reminds us that even in our darkest moments, opportunities for growth, change, and renewal exist. the resilience demonstrated in the face of ruin speaks to the human condition itself, a journey often marred by trials but equally defined by persistence. So, what can we take away from the dark legacy of the Black Death? It acted as a transformative crucible, a tumultuous force that changed the fabric of European society. This historical calamity pushed the boundaries of what was possible, sowing the seeds for modernity. From social reforms to intellectual enlightenment, the ripples of the plague resonate even today, reflecting our collective ability to confront adversity and emerge renewed. In the end, we must not only remember the devastation but also appreciate the resilience birthed from its ashes. The Black Death challenges us to consider how our current trials might sculpt our society, urging us to remain curious, empathetic, and engaged in the ongoing narrative of humanity. And as we edge our understanding of history, we also keep alive the hope that from darkness can indeed sprout the light. So, as we navigate our paths in this world, what remains essential is the courage to ask questions: what follows crises, and how will we shape our legacy? The answers may surprise and shape our future.